If I could travel beyond the Milky Way galaxy, deep into the blackness of intergalactic space, and see the cosmos true to how it would look to my human eyes, it would look like this. And if you were to consider the cosmos as only the human eye reveals it, you might feel that our little galaxy, drifting through an endless sea of space, is almost entirely alone. The situation gets even worse if we were to look at the galaxy through the lens of a camera, because while cameras might be able to capture fainter light, they cannot capture as wide a range of brightness as the human eye, and they cannot present what they do capture without special development, so the cosmos through the lens of a camera would be darker still. Of course, the cosmos is not an empty place. It is rather filled with light that we cannot see, but astrophotography cameras can detect it, and in the right circumstances, portray it. Most of this light is beyond the range of human vision, and without special processing, even our cameras will not reveal it. This means that astrophotographers and astronomers can never portray exactly what their cameras detect, and they can never show what they detect exactly according to how human eyes would see things. Let me take a moment and show you exactly why that is. NGC 6853, aka the Dumbbell Nebula, aka the Apple Core Nebula. The remnants of a star that died over 10,000 years ago. That star itself has collapsed into a bright white dwarf at the very center of this nebula, but the power of its death forced off its outer shell in the form of heavier elements that are currently jetting away into space. This did not happen all at once, but an explosion after explosion after explosion, leaving behind a beautiful but violent core of magnetic forces and ripping solar wind, as the star literally bleeds its mass off into deep space. Stars begin with the element hydrogen, and as they burn, they fuse their hydrogen into one element and then another and another. Hydrogen becomes helium, helium becomes lithium, lithium becomes beryllium, and so on. When a star can no longer fuse its elements of the periodic table into new elements, fusion stops and the star dies. Stellar death is a violent process, involving explosions and eruptions of unimaginable power. Planetary nebulae like the Dumbbell Nebulae come into being through just such processes, and the variety of color and structure result from the elements that star made when it was alive. But a planetary nebula is also a tombstone of a star system long dead. The Dumbbell has very bright regions and very faint regions, and it took me 2 weeks of shooting on moonless nights to gather enough integration or total exposure time to pull out this much detail. Even then, the photograph that the camera stored to the human eye would look only like this. But a camera is able to detect light that is simply too faint for the human eye to perceive. And thus we encounter the first reality that astrophotographers must contend with. For the deep sky object to become visible at all, the information captured by the camera must be brightened through a process called stretching, or histogram stretching. In this process, the information that comprises the image is pulled by a histogram tool, the tool that I am manipulating on the right, into a range of brightness that is suitable for human eyes. The next problem astrophotographers must contend with is that some parts of a deep sky object may be much fainter than others. In the case of the Dumbbell Nebula, the surrounding halo material is far fainter than the very bright core. The white plumes of bright material in the core of the Dumbbell Nebula are called cups knots, and while brighter than the halo, they are also much fainter than the rest of the gases in the central sphere. There is such a stark contrast in the brightness between the halo and the cups knots and the central sphere of the Dumbbell Nebula that an astrophotographer attempting to develop this information would find it impossible to reveal all the detail if they just brightened up everything in the same way. Imagine looking into the west and seeing clouds at sunset. The detail of the clouds very close to the sun are lost in brightness. Now imagine the first few seconds when you go from your bright home into the outdoors at night, how black it is in that first moment before your eyes adjust to the dark. A deep sky object with extreme variations in brightness from one part to another, like the Dumbbell Nebula, presents us with both problems at the same time. The cups knots would be lost in the brightness of the core, while the faint wings of the halo are lost because our eyes cannot adjust to seeing the bright and the faintness at the same time. I'll illustrate. Here is the exact same information, with all parts, the stars, the halo, the core, the cusp knots, brightened in exactly the same way. The structure of the much fainter cups and knots in the core is lost in the brightness of the surrounding gases, and the halo wings are lost in the brightness of the stars in the background. This difference between the darkest areas and the brightest areas is called the dynamic range. Human eyes have an extraordinary ability to perceive differences in dynamic range for objects here in the world where we and our eyes evolved. But when attempting to perceive the far greater dynamic ranges of objects out in the cosmos for which our eyes, minds, and bodies are not evolved, we face challenges which are biologically impossible. Fortunately, we can still reveal these objects as you've already seen with this photo, because modern photographic power and our increasing ability to capture fainter and fainter light, the much improved quality of the optics of modern telescopes, and especially increasing technological prowess to develop information captured by cameras, allows us to selectively brighten information so that we can reveal such images with all their information showing at once, by selectively adjusting the characteristics of the image to suit human vision and perception. Let's examine how astrophotographers and astronomers go about developing astrophotographic images in order to make them more suitable for human eyes and human perception. The first step will be color balancing the information. Objects in space are illuminated by stars or ionization or other effects that have light qualities and color temperatures that do not match what cameras are designed for. In addition, Earth's atmosphere will further affect the light coming from space and can alter its color qualities. Human eyes are remarkably adaptive and can balance color according to the way we're designed to perceive color, but cameras cannot. So unless this information is balanced, it will not match what our human eyes need to see. So astrophotographers must color balance the images in order to be suitable for human perception. For example, had I not color balanced the dumbbell nebula's information before developing it, the outcome wouldn't have been this, it would have been this. There are a variety of strategies that can be applied to color balance information, though I prefer the old and reliable one of assessing each image's data and balancing the color channels based on their median value. The median is basically the middle of their values. Without getting too complex about this, there are 3 color channels around which to balance: red, green, and blue, from which color images are made. In most cases, what I'll do is select the lowest median, use this as a reference point, and use a tool called linear fit to balance the medians of the other 2 color channels against whatever channel had the lowest median. This brings the red, green, and blue into color balance, at which point they can be combined and look good to we humans with our human eyes. Earth's atmosphere also creates other problems that astrophotographers must address for human perception. Even on the clearest of nights, and even if one were to shoot from the highest of mountains, utterly minimizing the effects of the atmosphere's effects on the information coming from space is still considerable. The atmosphere causes light passing through it to waver, much like water causes sunlight passing through it to waver, though not as strongly. However, in the realm of astrophotography, where astrophotographers and astronomers may be attempting to photograph regions of the sky as small as a grain of sand, this effect is significant. This introduces blur into an image, so the next thing astrophotographers will do is attempt to minimize the effects of the atmosphere. They shoot in clear dark nights for one. They use shorter and shorter exposure times in order to shoot hundreds or even thousands of images during the night and only accept those that have been affected minimally by wavering of the atmosphere. Some observatories are even developing highly advanced telescopes with mirrors capable of oscillating to bend light in ways that counter the effects of the atmosphere in order to make images purer. And many modern astrophotographers, both amateur and professional, use what is called non-additive AI-based deblurring tools, such as the famous Blur Exterminator. Tools like this examine how light is made to move by the atmosphere from one image to the next, determine an average location for the signal of light, and then focus all the information into those average locations. They do not alter color nor light values, nor add any information, but they are able to very accurately pinpoint where the light should go were it not for the effects of the atmosphere, and thus have the ability to minimize much of the blurring effect of the atmosphere on an image. This is a part of the image before the deblurring tool has been applied. Notice how the stars appear a little hazy. And here's the image after the deblurring tool has been applied. The deblurring tool has averaged the haze of each point, determined the probable central location, and localized the light signal to that location. It simply attempts to correct for the atmosphere's effects by placing all the light signal into its likely location. After this, as odd as it might sound, the next thing astrophotographers have to do to make an image suitable for human eyes is to remove the stars from the image. This is because stars tend to be much brighter than the deep sky objects we are attempting to image. So, if they were brightened and developed in the same way as the rest of the deep sky object, they would be blown out, an effect you can see in this image that I just used to illustrate deblurring. Many of the stars appear overbright now. They are blown out, their signal lost in the brightness, and due to the overbrightening, their surrounding pixels were also somewhat brightened, giving them a brightness haze, despite the deblurring process. So, a copy of the image is stretched specifically to bring out the best qualities in the stars. Then, a tool such as StarNet++ or the Star Exterminator is applied to the image to identify and remove the stars. They create a star plate, which is set aside to be added back to the image later after other developing is completed. Once astrophotographers have developed the stars to a suitable brightness, removed them, and saved them as a separate image, they can then focus on developing the deep sky object to be suitable for human perception. At this point, what they have to consider is how to stretch the histogram of the deep sky object in a balanced way to make sure all parts of the image become visible. Good stretching technique prevents naturally bright areas from becoming too bright, so they don't become blown out like the cloud in the sunset, while drawing out dark areas so their detail is visible even if brighter areas are nearby. Some deep sky objects do not have an extreme dynamic range and don't really require this procedure, but many do. Astrophotographers and astronomers have many tools to help them balance wide dynamic range, squeezing it to a range suitable for the human eye, such as scripts that auto-balance histograms. Such scripts attempt to assess the full range of brightness differences in an image and pull them all into a range suitable for vision, so that nothing is lost and everything is revealed to its best potential. Other astrophotographers, such as myself, recognize that such scripts, no matter how smart, have their failings, and manually do multiple stretches of high dynamic range images. In the case of a very high dynamic range image like the Dumbbell Nebula, I will make 3 stretches, one for the moderately faint cuff knots, one for the extremely faint halo, and one to accommodate the gas and dust of the much brighter central region. Images contain visual noise. The simplest way to think of noise is as a place where the image lacks information. If the camera doesn't have enough light to be certain what is there, it makes its best guess, and that can lead to noise. Human visual perception doesn't have noise in the same way. So, noise as it presents, especially from digital cameras, runs counter to the way our eyes work. Therefore, to bring an image into truer alignment with human vision, the noise must be removed. Throughout the many years of astrophotography, many tools have been devised to remove noise, and these days they have become very powerful. One of the most famous is the Noise Exterminator, which applies non-generative AI, this means it doesn't add anything to an image, to identify what is the actual desirable light signal, containing information of the deep sky objects and stars, versus what is noise. Then, in simplest terms, it averages out what it has identified as noise with the background. As you can see here, it's very effective. Our eyes are not digital cameras and don't see noise as random blotchiness, so denoising matches the images better to human perception. Once an astrophotographer has properly stretched and denoised renditions of the image, it's time to put the renditions together. Each rendition of the image has been stretched to reveal as much detail as possible at a given brightness level. The images are then merged in a process of compositing and masking, in such a way as to retain all the detail from each level of brightness. But it must be noted that this is a place where an astrophotographer has to make a subjective choice regarding how much of the image to reveal. They could, for example, just brighten up everything uniformly, matching somewhat how our eyes might see it through a telescope. But, as noted earlier, our eyes are not designed to perceive objects in space, and just as you can see here, much would be lost. In this uniformly histogram-stretched image, the faint cuff knots have been buried in the brightness of the core. So if an astrophotographer wants to reveal as much as possible of what's actually there, this is a place where they must compensate for both the limitations of human vision and the limitations of cameras. And that's why the differing brightness levels must be balanced against one another in order to make as much of the information within the image visible as possible. In a very real sense, one could say that this is the true version of the image, but this is also the true version of the image. This may be what our eyes would see were we to look straight through a very powerful telescope, but this is what's actually hidden within that image. You've probably noticed that there is a rendition of the image that I have not yet addressed. This is the Luminance image, and it's made by shooting the deep sky object through a luminance filter. A luminance filter is a filter that allows all light except for ultraviolet and infrared to pass. Ultraviolet and infrared light are restricted because they have different focus requirements, and allowing them to show up in a camera, many of which can detect a bit into the ultraviolet or infrared sides of the spectrum, would throw an image's focus off. But otherwise, the luminance filter allows all visible light to pass. Astrophotographers who operate beneath dark skies like I do, shoot in luminance to gather information as quickly as possible. Clear, ideal nights for shooting are rare and precious. Shooting in luminance allows the astrophotographer or astronomer to make the most of such nights. Luminance is not used to generate the color side of an image. That must be done through RGB filters. Even a color camera has built-in RGB filters called a bare layer. But by shooting on a monochrome sensor, which captures all available light, through a luminance filter, information can be captured 300% faster than by shooting RGB, whether by a color camera or with a monochrome camera. Because LRGB shooting is sensitive to light pollution, it can really only be done from dark skies, but astrophotographers who shoot in LRGB will typically shoot anywhere from 50% to 80% on the luminance filter and the remainder on the RGB or color filters. Like the color side of the image, the luminance image is also histogram stretched for the faint, mid-bright, and bright areas. However, since color is not derived from this portion of the image, no color balancing is required. And just like with the color image, the faint, mid-bright, and bright areas are masked and composited together to reveal all the detail and information. Then, the color portion of the image is brought back into the equation, and the color information is joined to the luminance information to create a highly detailed, brightness-balanced, full-color image that ideally retains all the information from the darkest to the brightest areas, despite the limitations of both cameras and human eyes to capture the full breadth of dynamic range recorded in the original information. Now recall earlier that we had separated the stars from the image after they had been stretched to reveal them at their best quality. By avoiding making them overbright, the stars show up as finer points without artificially induced brightness halos. And their color shows up better too, and that's important because stars come in a beautiful range of colors, from dazzling whites to reds and yellows to luminous blues. About the only color you never see a star in is green. The stars have received their own histogram stretch to bring their brightness up to a level that allows all these wonderful characteristics to show through at their best, and to keep the image as true to human vision as possible while also showing as much information as possible. We're going to add the stars back to the image now. This is done in a way that is very similar to the way the three brightness levels of the luminance and the color versions of the image were put together, through compositing, which adds the information from one image to another. In this case, we'll composite the stars to the deep sky object. As you can see, there is no way for an astrophotographer to show an image exactly as it is captured by way of the camera. The information the camera captures must be adjusted to compensate for the limitations of both camera technology and human vision. Amazing objects, such as the Dumbbell Nebula, have an immense amount of information in the form of detail, structure, and color that would vanish both in overwhelming brightness and darkness. And if an astrophotographer is going to reveal this all, they must compensate for those extremes and bring everything into a range that is suitable for human visual perception. As we can see in this image alone, if that compensation was not made, its amazing halo that appears in the form of wings would be almost entirely lost, as well as the fascinating and detailed structure of the cusped knots within the heart of the nebula near the white dwarf that formed it. All photography is a compromise: how much color to bring out, what kind of detail to emphasize, and where to draw the eye. There is no photography of any kind that is just the way the camera captures it, because cameras are literally incapable of capturing images the way the human eye sees it. And since astrophotographers are imaging objects which the human eye and brain are simply not evolved to see, it is absolutely necessary to adjust the information to be suitable for our perception. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any thoughts, observations, or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Have a great day, and for those of you who are astronomers and astrophotographers that watch this channel, get out there and shoot that amazing sky.